Well, good morning, everyone. Please open your New Testaments to Mark chapter 12. And while you're heading there, let me add my welcome to all of you that are with us, visitors and members here with us in the auditorium. Those of you who are streaming with us live on Zoom, thank you so much. It's certainly good to be with you. We're returning after a month of covering lessons on Thanksgiving in November, back to the study of the life of Jesus as it's recorded for us in the Gospel of Mark. And I want to kind of bring us up to speed with where we are, what we've seen already. That will, I think, help us in our discussion of the text that we're going to be looking at this morning, especially from Jesus' perspective. So I'm going to start with that review. And then we will get into the text itself. We are in the last week of the life and ministry of Jesus prior to his death on the cross. It's a time filled with a lot of events and confrontations, in fact, that are kind of riveting as you're reading about them. I believe that we're still on Tuesday of that week. And this is the week of his trials, the week of his crucifixion and resurrection. And all things are moving along as Jesus wants them to. He's in control of all of this. I think it's important that we understand that. So as we look back on the life of Christ, he has demonstrated very clearly that he is in fact the Christ, the Son of God. And as we pointed out last week, that he is the God who came in the flesh. We've seen his power over disease. We've seen his power over demons. We've seen his power over nature. We've even seen his power over death. He has absolute sovereign power in both the physical and spiritual realms. And he has displayed his deity not only by the power that he's displayed, but also by his mercy that he has shown. We have seen and heard his clear and perfect articulation of the truth about the way things have been, the way things are, and the way things will be. We have seen him tell us the truth about man and the truth about God and the truth about the kingdom of God, the truth about forgiveness and salvation and eternal punishment. And all during these 3 years of his public ministry, he has been dogged by the religious leaders, and probably started in earnest when he first cleansed the temple that's recorded for us in the Gospel of John. And it's kind of ramped up this week because he did it again. He went in there and cleansed the temple again. And these are supposedly the leaders, the defenders of the truth, of the faith of the Jews, and they followed him around not to learn the truth, but to try to find some way to destroy him. In fact, just in one of our recent lessons, Jesus told them a parable that very much describes their history, where they have persecuted all of the servants that God had sent, and finally that's going to end in them killing the Son. And they recognize that the parable is about him. There, you're still in Mark 12, in verse 12, it says, and they looked for a way to arrest him because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. They knew it. The people have known for a while that the leaders are trying to get rid of Jesus. They certainly know that the leaders want him dead. And now Jesus has just announced it publicly that he knows it as well. And so we are told there at the end of verse 12 that they left him and went away. I want you to appreciate the fact that they're not hiding. They have gone away to plan how that they can destroy him. And we're going to see the first phase of that plan in our text this morning. The Sanhedrin was made up of 70 rulers plus one, and the plus one was the high priest. And they have a problem with Jesus. And a problem with carrying out their plan. Number one, they have the difficult task of of turning the people against him, because he's extremely popular with the masses. Back again in Mark the 11th chapter, in verses 1 through 10, you have the triumphal entry, and they're throwing fronds down and their clothes down and making way for him and shouting out, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, and the kingdom of David is coming back. And so he's very popular with the people. So they have to change that. And they also have to try to convince Rome that he is a threat to them so that they will kill him. And so I think that's what that meeting was all about when they left there in verse 12. The title of our lesson this morning is An Analysis of Hypocrisy. An analysis is, we want to just look at the essential nature of hypocrisy. It's like conducting a pathological, they take a biopsy from you and they look at it and try to figure out what's wrong. We're gonna do that with hypocrisy this morning. And in the course of the text, as we go through it, especially the early part of this text, I'm going to point out 3 different characteristics of religious hypocrisy, of religious hypocrites, and we'll just go right on through this text. Our text this morning, as you can see there on the screen, is Mark chapter 12, verses 13 through 17. Let's begin. Let's read. I'm just going to read a verse at a time, and we'll just go through it that way, in pieces of verses sometimes. Verse 13, it says, Later they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. So here is the first characteristic of religious hypocrisy, and that is that hypocrites make awkward alliances. Truth cannot make alliances with error. It's just not possible. But all kinds of evil can make all kinds of alliances with all other kinds of evil against the truth, and that's what we see going on here. Now you'll notice that the verse starts out, later they sent. So what I want to know is, who is the they? Who is the they of verse 13? Well, the they of verse 13 is the same they of verse 12, that they looked for a way to arrest him because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. And if you go back to the 11th chapter of Mark and verse 27, it says, they arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. There's the they. The they is the Sanhedrin. Okay? And it says that they sent them. Well, where did they send them from? Where do they start? Well, I think it's from this meeting that they had. They got all together and decided, okay, we've got to take care of Jesus. We've got to figure out a way to destroy him. And so they have now a plan that they're going to use to destroy Jesus. And of course, who is sent here in verse 13? They sent the Pharisees and the Herodians. Matthew's account says that they laid a trap for him in chapter 22 and verse 15. Luke gives us that they sent spies to watch him closely in Luke 20 and verse 20. And while the Herodians and the Pharisees were 2 sects of the Jews, politically speaking, that it coexisted in Israel, they are not friends. The Pharisees are probably the most religious party of the Jews. The Herodians are the most political. The Pharisees are concerned about the law of God. The Herodians are concerned about the law of Rome. The Pharisees were devoted to Israel. The Herodians are devoted to Rome. The Pharisees hated the Herodians. They believed that they sold out to Rome. And I'm sure that the Herodians thought the Pharisees were dinosaurs. They were passé. They hadn't come up into the times, didn't realize things are changing. And so there was just this mutual animosity. And so it's very interesting to see them together here on this occasion. The Pharisees want to get rid of Jesus because of his theology. They realize that Rome could care less about Jesus' theology. They're not going to do anything to Jesus based on that. So they need to make Rome care about Jesus' politics. That's what's going to interest them. And for whatever reason, when that happens, the Herodians are right there to take word to the Roman officials with regard to what happens. So this is their plan. The plan is to trap him in his words. They're going to try to kill two birds with one stone here. Number one, in doing this, they're going to try to take away his popularity from the people. And at the same time, awaken Rome and have them kill them because he has become an established threat to the Roman Empire. Now, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but Rome knows about the triumphal entry. How could Pilate and the Roman people that are there and the governor there, how could they not know about that? How could they not know about his popularity? How could they not know that as he's coming into town, everybody is declaring him to be the Messiah and laying out these palm fronds and their coats so that his donkey won't have to walk on the ground. They know that already. So Jesus has kind of become an established threat already in the Roman mind. If he's arrested by the Romans, since the people believe that he's the Messiah, and their view of the Messiah is that the Messiah was going to throw off the Roman rule, that when he fails and when he is arrested, the Sanhedrin is kind of hoping that the people will just forget about him. And it may be that the answer to their question that they're going to ask in a few moments will also offend them and cause them not to be popular with him. So the plan overview is get Jesus arrested, destroy the popularity, and have Rome kill him. That's the plan in a nutshell. And listen, the leaders think they have Jesus in a corner. This question is it's a can't lose question. They're going to get him. Now I'll point out as well here in verse 13, it says that they came to catch him in his words. That word catch or trap, some of your translations will have, is a verb that's not used anywhere else in the New Testament. And it's agruo, and it means to take by hunting, to capture. So they're on the trail, and they are trying to hunt Jesus down and capture him. So verse 14, the first part of it, they came to him and said, "Teacher, we know you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." Let's just stop right there. So here's the second characteristic of a hypocrite, and that is that they'll use any devious means they can to make their point or make their case or gain ground, even outright lying. And listen, none of the things that you just read that they said to Jesus do they believe. They begin by calling him teacher. That is a title of respect and honor that was given to rabbis. I want you to just imagine how hard it was for them to call him that, to call him teacher, to even sound respectful. But it's not as hard as the second one, and that is that we know that you're a man of integrity. We know that you are true. We know that you are honest. Listen, they don't believe that for a second. That is not anything. They in fact believe Jesus is the opposite. They believe he's a liar. They believe that he's a fraud. They believe that he must be silenced, that in fact he has to be silenced and killed. So why are they saying this? Well, they're trying to flatter him. And in fact, they're also trying to present themselves as being of the same mind as the multitudes who believe these things of Jesus. So they're flattering him and at the same time trying to identify themselves with the multitude. And it's all an act. That's why it's hypocrisy. They're speaking through a mask. They're trying to present themselves as truth seekers. But there's another reason why they're doing that, and that is they are trying to set the bar very high for Jesus here. To flatter him and do so publicly in a way that there's just not any real way that he can avoid answering their question. They are saying, you're not swayed by men. You don't pay attention to what's popular. You don't pay attention to what's accepted. In fact, you only teach the Word of God in truth. the Word of God and teaching what's right, in Luke's account, is the Greek word orthos, which comes from orthodoxy. You only teach what's orthodox. I need you to picture them saying all these things through gritted teeth. It's so hard for them to spit that out. So, and if I put it into other words here, we want your truthful, non-biased, who cares what the consequences are to answer to our question. They want him to answer the question. They have to have him answer this question. That's the only way that their trap can be sprung. They are not seeking truth. They're being devious here and saying whatever they have to say to get Jesus to respond. And so here's the question at the end of verse 14 in the very first part of verse 15. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay or should we not? And this is the third and final characteristic of a hypocrite, and that is that they will eventually make their agenda known. They will be seen for who they are. Again, they don't want the truth. They're trying to discredit the truth here. And if you're just patient with someone who's acting a hypocrite, it'll come out. It'll be seen. So here's our question. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And then its companion question, should we pay or shouldn't we? The NIV has, is it right? The Greek word is exesti. Here, I'll put it up there. I think I have that up there. And it literally means, is it lawful? And lawful in the sense of the law of Moses. They know it's lawful with regard to Rome. So they're wanting to know if from the Bible, from the Old Testament, is it lawful for us to pay these taxes? You're a rabbi. You speak nothing but truth. You teach the way of God in accordance with truth. You're not swayed by anything. You don't care about the consequences of your answer. So tell us whether we should do that. And again, they're pretending to want to know. Should we as Jews pay taxes to a Gentile, idolatrous, occupier and invader of the Holy Land? Should we pay taxes to an oppressor of God's people, or should we not pay? And again, I just point out to you that they believe that Jesus can only give one answer to this question. And that is, no, we should not be paying this tax. In fact, if they turned around and asked the crowd, should we be paying this tax? Most of them, everybody but Herodians there, would say no. The Herodians would say pay it. The Pharisees obviously are saying they should not. And the tax here is the poll tax. It's the poll tax that was paid to Caesar. Everyone paid this every year. It was 1 denarius. It was 1 day's wage. And it's like a census, because if you're alive, you have to pay the tax. I don't care if you're a 5-day-old baby. You have to pay the tax on this day. And so it was taking of a census as well. And Luke's account says taxes, and so he would include all taxes in general. That would include land tax, a tax of the 10th of your grain and oil and wine, import taxes, taxes that you paid when you entered the city. And do we pay these taxes? Does the law of God tell us to do so? Is it lawful? That's the basis. Now, I want you to realize that there is a history behind this question, and there is a sentiment among the people and the populace about this question. About the time when Jesus was 6 years of age, there was a Galilean who was named Judas. And it's not the Judas that's the apostle, obviously. And according to Josephus, he led an insurrection against Rome. So that's about 6 AD. And the basis for that insurrection by Judas of Galilee was this census and this poll tax. Judas and his friends and companions there revolted because they said to pay that tax was ungodly. Judas ended up being killed and the insurrection was put down. And that may sound familiar to you because in Acts the 5th chapter and verse 37, Gamaliel said, after him Judas the Galilean appeared in the days of the census and led a band of people in revolt. He too was killed and his followers were scattered. So it's this tax that caused that revolt back in 6 AD. It's this tax that's going to cause a revolt in 66 AD that Rome is again going to put down, and it's going to end with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So this tax is just a boiling kettle of problems for Rome. And the Jews realize this. They realize that. And so they're hoping that Jesus is going to become another Judas of Galilee and that he's going to be killed. So we move on to the latter part of verse 15. It says, "But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. 'Why are you trying to trap me?' he asked. 'Bring me a denarius and let me look at it.'" So Jesus recognized all of the characteristics of hypocrisy that we've pointed out. In fact, he's even going to let them know he knows, because he said, "Why are you trying to trap me?" Mark tells us that he knew they were being hypocrites. Luke says he saw through their duplicity. Matthew records that he knew their evil intent. So while what they were putting forward was holy and righteous, their intent was evil. And let me just add here, hypocrisy is not an accident. Hypocrisy is not a flaw. Hypocrisy is something that is deliberately done, and it is utterly evil. There's nothing right about it. So he asked them, "Why are you trying to trap me?" He asked them that so he knew what they were doing. He's informing them about that. And then he says, "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." On my way to assembly this morning for class, I was thinking in my head, what did that sound like when Jesus asked that? Should we pay this tax? And Jesus said, "All right, show me a denarius, let me look." Was it that, or was it more upbeat? Show me a denarius, let me look at it. I don't know what the tone was that he had there. But when he asked that and says, "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." By the way, if you have a King James Version that says penny, that's not correct. It's not a penny. It's a shekel. It's a denarius. Jews carried around shekels and pennies, none of which had images on them. The Roman denarius had an image on it. And to the Jew, carrying a denarius around was like having idolatry in your purse or in your pocket if they had pockets, because they didn't have any images on it. So when he said, "Bring me a denarius," I'm guessing the only person in the crowd that had a denarius would have been Herodian. He's the only one that would have been willing to have one of those. And I will tell you, I don't think they could get one quick enough. I mean, they're looking for a denarius as quick as they can to bring it to Jesus to let him look at it. I don't know, maybe they think, "I can't believe he has never seen one because he said, I want to look at it." But they did. And so here is the denarius. Here is probably not the coin, but the same kind of coin that they're showing Jesus, because it was minted by Tiberius Caesar, and Tiberius is going to reign from 14 AD to 37, so it would be his coin that would be in the realm at that point in time. And like all coins, it has two sides to it, and I know that you can't see that, and so I'm going to show you the back side first. There it is. There's a woman sitting there, picture of a woman. It could be Livia, which would be Tiberius' mother, also Augustus' wife. He's the first Caesar there. It could be Pax, who is the goddess of peace. It could be Justia, who is the goddess of justice. And so what you read on the outside, the inscription, because Jesus is going to talk about that in a minute. The inscription on the back says Pontiff Maxim. And that is a shortened version of Pontifex Maximus. Pontifex Maximus. And what that is basically saying is that's Chief Pontiff. He is Tiberius claiming to be the high priest in the religion of Rome. He's claiming to be the emperor of the imperial power of worship. I think it's very interesting that the Pope still has that title today of pontiff. So that's the back. That was free, by the way. Here's the front. And the front we have Tiberius. And you can see that he has his laurel crown on there. And this is the inscription. I don't want to try to read that for you. I will try. T. Caesar Divi Aug Augustus. I don't know what the F is there, but I will give you the translation. Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. Augustus. The message is that Tiberius is also divine. He is on the coin calling himself the Son of God. He's the son of Augustus, the God. Can you see why most Jews felt like this was idolatry, to even have this on your person? And again, the Jews have approached and they believe that Jesus would also have that attitude. They would believe that he would think it's also blasphemy to pay this tax. And so when he answers their question the way they think he will, which is don't pay, then the Herodians are going to lift up their skirts and run right to Pilate and say, here's the guy, he's telling people not to pay the tax, just like Judas did. So that brings us to verse 16. They brought the coin and he asked them, whose portrait is this and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Now, I want you to understand that Jesus' answer was not an answer that they had even thought that he would give. It's completely unanticipated and unexpected. And Jesus is wanting them to commit themselves. He's going to bring them in, and even if they don't realize it, they're going to be caught in their own web here as he talks about it. So he asks the question, whose portrait is this? Whose image? The Greek word is icon. You know what an icon is. And then the second one is, and whose inscription? Who wrote these words? Who is it talking about? The idea of an icon is that of a mirror image, of a reflection of the person on the coin. And again, I'll tell you, when he asked that question, they could not get the answer out quick enough. They're tripping. You just hear it through the crowd. Caesar, 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 Caesar. Everybody can answer that question. It's Caesar's. Caesar's image, Caesar's inscription. So let's read verse 17. Then Jesus said to them, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And they were amazed at him. So again, this is this unexpected response. The trap has fallen in on themselves here. And let me begin with the first part here. This is the part that we normally spend the most time on. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. And basically, Jesus answered the question exactly what they wanted. Pay the tax, he's saying. Render back. Give back what's owed to Caesar. You owe him this. But why? Well, because government is an institution of God. Paul's going to echo that in Romans chapter 13, verses 6 and 7. This is why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. He's going to tell Timothy in 2 Timothy, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in godliness and holiness. So there's the purpose of government. And then Peter also is going to say in 1 Peter chapter 2, submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor, who we're talking about right now, as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. Listen, government is a part of God's common grace that he's given to all mankind. Henry mentioned government this morning. He mentioned rain and sun and air and water and food and seasons. I mean, all of those are a part of God's common grace that comes to everybody. There's not anybody that misses out on any of that. And while I want government or our rulers to rule as God would have them, and in fact, as Paul told Timothy, I pray for them to do that, I'm not surprised when they don't. There's no such thing as a physical Christian government. There's no such thing as a physical Christian nation. There never will be. God's government and God's nation is spiritual. And you and I are part of that holy nation. We are a part of the Lord's spiritual kingdom now. So what had Rome done for them? Why should they pay this tax? What does any government do for anybody? Well, Rome built bridges, they built roads everywhere, which made transportation and getting from point A to point B very easy. They provided military protection and the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And what did that do? That allowed the gospel to go everywhere. And to go easily and to go in a pretty safe environment as well. So for Rome, that was their thing. So let's ask our own question of Jesus here then. So Jesus, are you saying that we should pay taxes to a government that is about to kill you on a cross in 3 days? And Jesus is going to say, pay the tax. Pay the tax. Because the realm of Caesar and government is something that is God-given, and God will hold them accountable for what they do with that authority and responsibility. That's not my job. Unless the government forbids us to do what God commands. Acts chapter 5 and verse 29, Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than human beings. So if they tell me I can't do something God wants me to do, well then I'm done listening to you. At least on that account. But the church is not to act or take over the government, because the God-given purpose for government is different than it is for the church, for his people. We have a unique purpose. We have a unique call. The church is to be the pillar and support of the truth, according to 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15. And our focus is individuals, to call men and women individually to the gospel, to Jesus Christ, to salvation. We're not converting whole nations unless we do it one at a time, one person at a time. So we render what we owe to the government because God has placed that obligation on us to support that servant that he has assigned. And I know there are people that disagree with that, but again, Jesus spoke pretty plainly here, and this is the Jesus who knew that the Roman government was going to crucify him in 3 days, and he says, pay the tax. But I want to look at the second part. Understood in this text where he says, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, understood is, and render to God the things that are God's. Jesus kind of turns the tables here on the Jews, because the issue with the Jews and what they're focused on here, they're busy focusing on Caesar and whether to give Caesar what's due to him, and they forgot about giving God what was due him. Remember an occasion historically in Daniel, the 4th chapter, a guy by the name of Nebuchadnezzar forgot to give God glory for all that he had. And he looked out at his kingdom and said, look what I've done, look what by my own hand. Remember what happened to him? He became an animal. The kingdom was taken away from him for a time, and then God gave it back. That's what happens when you forget to give God his due. I'll put that up there so you can think about that. So our main concern ought to be, the question that we ought to be concerned about is, what do we owe God? In John the 5th chapter and at verse 23, Jesus said that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Listen, God deserves our honor, and consequently we also need to honor his Son. If you honor me, you honor the Father. If you don't, you don't. Either one. So what did they owe God? What do we owe God? I will tell you that it's not hypocrisy. It's not empty religious practices. It's not empty songs and empty prayers. What we owe God is what Jesus said in Matthew the 22nd chapter in verse 37, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's what we owe God. If you think about it, the coin that, I got muted again. Luckily, I was told. The coin that I showed you a few minutes ago bore the image of Caesar. If you look at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26 and 27, portions of that, then God said, let us make mankind in our image. So God created man in his own image. Listen, when I put that verse in our text, what that tells me is, I look at the coin, I see Caesar's face on it, then I give the coin to Caesar. And when I look at myself and I see God's image, then what's rendered to God is God's. And so I give myself to him. That's the message. That's what Jesus was trying to get them to understand. And they're amazed. You know, at the end of verse 17, they're amazed at him. Why? Well, because he came up with a response they hadn't even thought about. They hadn't even considered. By the way, just as a heads up with what's coming, there are three different groups that made up the Sanhedrin: the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes. And what we saw was group one, the Pharisees. We got two more that are going to try and trap Jesus with the Sadducees and the scribes. I will tell you that there is nothing uglier than hateful hypocrisy. And we've got to avoid both sides of that coin. And in fact, Jesus is not going to be fooled. He's not going to be fooled by us or anyone else. And yet, don't think that if you've got a question or a need that you need to approach Jesus with, that he's not wanting you to bring that. If you're bringing it in sincerity and you're bringing it seeking truth, if you have honest questions, if you have honest needs, he will answer it. He will provide. That is his promise. And if there's some way this morning that we can help you on either side of that, in coming to know about Jesus and learning about him and who he is, we would love to have the opportunity to share it. If you already believe that Jesus is the Christ and you're ready to give your life to him, then we have a song that's selected. It's not up there quite yet. There it is. There's a great day coming. The great day can be the day you become a child of God. There'll be another day that you don't want to come if you're not ready for that, and it's a day of judgment. So prepare now. Get ready now. And if we can help you with something, please come forward and let us know.